feel like in Hakomi, we're in the business of teaching reverence. It's a funny word to use in psychotherapy. And it really departs from psychoanalytic theory of like an anonymity and neutrality. So I think if we embody a sense of golden retriever consciousness. Golden retriever, they come to the door, they're so happy to see you. They want to jump and sniff that kind of sense of celebration. If a client comes in and you're looking for, well, what's wrong with you? It creates a certain kind of container. That is far from a neutral act, looking through the eyes of psychopathology. If you can celebrate their wonderfulness, then something else begins to happen. Hakomi gave me a structure where I felt like I could blossom as a person. As a therapist, definitely, but also as a person. Ended up embodying more and more of who I am. Hakomi gave me a place where I could embody more of my own lovingness.
I really want for our listeners to understand how this is different from maybe what they've experienced in the past with talk therapy. Rob Fisher, I am so excited to have you on my podcast.
Thank you.
So I know you as a leader in Hakomi, in teaching others how to do Hakomi. You're a supervisor for some of the folks that I know that have gone through the Hakomi training. I considered during the pandemic doing certification with the San Francisco Hakomi group, and I ended up with the Boulder group. But I heard about you and watched some of your videos, and I was so inspired by your use of Hakomi. So I wanted to start first with your background. Can you tell us a bit about how you came to Hakomi and what it means for you?
Okay. I am a member of the cult of experience, and which started in the hippie years. Like, we were really an experience-hungry generation. And so when I went to college and was working on my degree in psychology before I dropped out of the department, it was all behaviorism at the time. And if it wasn't behaviorism, it was psychoanalysis. And those two had a hold on the field. It really wasn't what I was interested in. But I really was interested in experience, and so as a good card-carrying member of the hippie generation, then I went towards experience, and I found Gestalt originally. I loved Gestalt. It was my first therapeutic love. And Hakomi really draws from, among other sources, from Gestalt. But it works with live experience. And I like that, rather than talking about it. And the founder of Hakomi, Ron Kurtz, and I started a book, which we never finished, called something like Real Therapy, Not Just Conversation. There's a little bit of an adversarial title, and we never finished it. There's a great quote, which then I ran across many, many years ago. It was by an analyst, Frieda Fromm-Reichmann, like a neo-Freudian analyst. And she said, the patient needs an experience, not an interpretation. And I thought, that's true. You know, and now we know, from what we know about how people's brains work, is when you have experiences, then it changes how the neural networks work and how they fire. And so talking about things in therapy is fine. I don't mean to knock that at all. But I really like the idea of having experiences in therapy and working with experience, because it's so much more visceral and impactful and sweet. So I gravitated. When I ran into Hakomi, I just thought, oh, this is the cat's meow, and just studied it, and eventually became a teacher and a trainer, and then ended up teaching all over the world.
So I'm curious about that experience of studying psychology in college, having the influence of behaviorism and psychoanalysis, feeling like there was some other way that made more sense to you. How long was it then before you got exposed to Gestalt, to these other ways of working with experience?
I got exposed to Gestalt right away. And in fact, I traveled to the Gestalt Institute of Canada to study with Pearls, who thankfully died before I got there, because I think it would have been a bad combination, me and him. He's much too rough for me. But I did study there, and so that really opened the door. And then I got involved in the world of three-piece suits and public offerings and the heavy-duty financial world, which we were talking about before, and spent quite a while doing that and consulting and building public companies and, wearing my three-piece suit, but driving to work on my bicycle. So it never completely captured me. And eventually I went back and got my master's in psychology. And
how old were you when you did that?
got my master's.
Yes.
It was mid-30s, I'd say.
Mid-30s.
Yeah.
And so there was some experience that was missing when you were in the three-piece suit, even on your bicycle,
Yeah.
that wasn't satisfying to you.
I was in the entertainment industry, so I was in the business side of the entertainment industry. And my goal was to become a famous French film director, even though I lacked some qualifications. So I went and I studied with my favorite famous French director, and then I also ended up in business affairs jobs. I knew nothing about it. I didn't have an MBA, but my father was a businessman. So somehow it was in my blood. So I ended up the vice president of business affairs of a public company, which was the first cable network after ESPN. It's a financial news network. So there were 4 founders. I was one of them. And so we broadcast 13 hours a day of business and financial news. But that wasn't why I had got into it. I was going to make these films that were going to touch people's hearts, and change the culture. So it was the same vision as my vision of therapy. And it's a very hard world, the entertainment industry. I mean, the people who are in it and the way people relate to each other is really not my cup of tea. But the creativity is just gorgeous there, and I loved that part of it. So I eventually, as it was becoming clear that I was not going to realize my vision anytime soon, and so I went back and started studying for my master's at that point.
And when you began working on your master's in your mid-30s, how long was it before you discovered Hakomi? Can you tell us about that?
It was another 10 years probably.
Okay.
There was a friend of mine who worked at CIS said, I think he really likes this Hakomi thing. And so I went over to the Institute and I watched a film and I thought, wow, this stuff is so cool. It's exactly what I want to do, and I don't really know how to do it. And it took me a long time to figure it out. I was a remedial student, but I did figure it out.
What did you figure out? And I want to maybe back up for a moment and hear, what is Hakomi?
Hakomi is a body-centered, mindfulness-centered form of psychotherapy. So it uses present moment experience as a doorway into the core material that organizes our lives and our relationships. And the method relies very heavily on an application of mindfulness. And it's not the application where you say, okay, now go inside, close your eyes and go inside and, take a couple of deep breaths. And it's not that kind of mindfulness. We're not just doing mindfulness. We're having people study their internal experience. So if you say, oh, I'm feeling sad, I might say, oh, somewhere in your chest, huh? Go ahead and feel your hand on your chest and let yourself spend some time there. Take your time. Let's let the emotions be there, and if there are any sensations or impulses or memories. So we're using that as an access route to that deeper core material that really organizes how we live our lives. But we're coming from the experience in the present moment. And we take the body. The body is a great source of present moment experience. And so we use things like gesture and posture and pace and energy and how people are set up geographically in the room and how they shake your hand. Like, I'll give you an example, actually.
Yes, please.
I had a client. He's a really big guy. He actually had to bend, duck his head a little bit to get through my door. Big, strong guy. And we did a first session, and at the end of the session, as he's leaving, he turns around in the doorway and to shake my hand. This guy's like a giant. And I can just imagine the bone-crushing quality of his handshake. And so he takes my hand and, give me your hand.
Yeah.
So it's like this.
Oh, kind of limp.
Yeah, totally, like dead fish handshake. So that's significant, right? You know,
Yeah.
it's something that he was showing me something about how he organizes it about power and relationships with the strength or weakness of his handshake. And we didn't have time to work with that then, but we did come back to it. And I said, you know, you've got a really interesting handshake. Like you're such a big guy. I think you're going to crush my hand, but completely the opposite. And you know what, let's shake hands again. And you can just study, like, what's that like? And he had a memory. The memory was in 6th grade. He was bigger than all the other kids. He said, I beat the shit out of Johnny Smith. You know, and I realized I just couldn't use my power. And I made this decision not to use it. So you could see that reflected in how he was, you know, so the body is a really rich source of information. And people, when they talk, they sanitize everything. We sanitize everything. You know, they present the best, and, you know, as clients, they're either heroes or victims. But the body will give you the really high quality information. So we use the body to kind of access internal material and get good information, and mindfulness to deepen into it, and to let it unfold. Like, let's stay with that. Let's see where it takes you. You know, if you stay with that kind of the energy in your hand, like what happens. You know, and if you stay with there's a assumption in Hakomi where if you stay with an experience, it will unfold in some creative and intelligent way. Which is, it's an interesting assumption. I had a lot of trouble with that as a student, because I was used to try to make things happen.
Yeah, so you're speaking to a distinction that I want to maybe go deeper with. I'm trained in conventional medicine, where there's a bit of an override of the body. There's not a lot of listening to the body. There's much more of a cognitive approach to whatever symptoms are occurring, and less of a trust in the wisdom of the body that I think you're speaking to. So it sounds like that really spoke to you, that it made sense to you.
The part that made sense to me was not only the emphasis on the body, but the use of mindfulness and as a way of deepening into experience, and the idea that we really want to create new experiences in therapy rather than just talk about things. Talking about things is fine. I think it helps orient people, and, you know, you can give people good advice, and you can interrupt, you know, core beliefs and different patterns. But I think to go to the heart of the matter, I think I'd like to go to experience. And I don't think that's the only way to work. I think we choose our own theoretical orientations based on our own psychopathology, you know, or our own values, basically, to say it in a nicer way. But, you know, and some, you know, if you look at different orientations, they're going to attract different kinds of people.
Yes, and, you know, one of the things that I've been struck by when I was looking at a condition like post-traumatic stress disorder or depression, and the gold standard of talk therapy combined with selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, I was shocked at how low the efficacy is. It just feels to me like we're missing something. We're missing something really important. And maybe part of what we're missing is that experience that you're talking about.
Yeah. That could be. I'd like to say I knew that was the truth, but I'd be on firmer ground saying I like that approach, and I like having that kind of relationship with people. And I'm very suspicious of people who, quote, know the truth about things. I've seen so many leaders in the psychospiritual field promulgate this idea that they know the truth, and they've made it up. And they've made it up because they need to be leaders or whatever their own psychology is. So I'm very suspicious of that. And so I don't want to be one of those people. I know a certain amount. I'm really good at certain things in therapy, but I don't feel like I know the ultimate truth of things. Like, I'm really good at tracking people. I can tell stuff that they don't even know is going on. But
How did you get so good at tracking people?
40 years of practice. It really, I was terrible at it starting off. I was really bad at it because I was so trained to listen to the content of what people say. And I'm so interested in stories. I write, another part of my background is I'm on my 4th novel now, so I like to write fiction.
Yeah, I want to hear about that, and also how it dovetails with your work with people with Hakomi, because it sounds like there's maybe a way they feed each other.
They do. They do. One thing is how a therapist talks to a client is significant. So if you talk in practical ways, it's going to evoke a certain part of them. You know, if you talk in more abstractions, it's going to evoke an abstracted part of them. If you speak more poetically, it's going to go into the unconscious differently. So I'm not always able to speak in poetry, but I have a poetic slant to it. So I write a lot of poetry, or I have. But I think that's very important, that metaphoric and imagetic world is really important in kind of going in with people. And the efficacy of psychotherapy is much more oriented towards the relationship between the therapist and client than it is to any theoretical scaffolding. If you look at research studies. So we come up with all these different theories. You know, there's something like 400 different therapeutic approaches. And each one will tell you they directly came as a word from God. But I think that if you get into the research studies, it's more about the relationship. So how do we train people to be in a healing relationship where people's unconscious wants to unfold? So I think that's the trick, and that becomes very magical.
How do you teach that, Rob?
You can ask me that question. I know how to. It's hard. There are technical parts, and then there's internal state development parts. The technical parts is really learning how to be with somebody in the present moment, how to notice what's happening in the present. Those little muscular changes in somebody's face, or they change posture, or the quick wafting of sadness across their eyes, and a little bit more moisture in their eyes, stuff like that. So that's a technical piece. But underneath that, I think I feel like we're in Hakomi, we're in the business of teaching reverence. It's a funny word to use in psychotherapy. And it really departs, from psychoanalytic theory of like an anonymity and neutrality. So I think if we embody a sense of golden retriever consciousness, golden retriever, they come to the door, they're so happy to see you. They want to jump and sniff and, have you play with lick, right? Yeah. So you're not supposed to lick clients, but that kind of sense of celebration. If a client comes in and you're looking for, well, what's wrong with you? It creates a certain kind of container that is far from a neutral act, looking through the eyes of psychopathology. If you can celebrate their wonderfulness, then something else begins to happen. And because that's really a missing experience for most people. And then the injuries and the limitations start to arise in a way that is more spontaneous. So I think we're trying to teach people golden retriever consciousness, a very advanced mental state. Humans have a great trouble with that. But like, for instance, one exercise that we do in the training is non-egocentric nourishment. Like, what is happening in the present moment that nourishes you? So, like, periodically you smile at me. Like, so that's nourishing to me, and I think, oh, okay, I can relax, and it's not really that bad, and maintaining eye contact with me, stuff like that. So that it feels nourishing, and you're like, I can tell you have a dedication to realness and to truth and to exploration. So all those things, just being in the presence of that, is nourishing to me. So we teach people how to look for those things, and how to be nourished by them. So the client really doesn't need to do a lot. You just sit down, and the therapist ideally is going to say, wow, this is great. I get to be in contact with this form of the divine. We don't say that. That's more Rob than Hakomi. But
I like that part, Rob.
yeah.
That feels really critical to what I witness with the care that you give. I'm curious about how this developed over your career with Hakomi. Like, what were you like when you first started taking care of clients? You said you discovered Hakomi in your 40s.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just curious, like, what does it look like up to the present moment?
Between the discovering Hakomi and now, or prior to
Discovering Hakomi and now, and this, the way you're describing the healing relationship and connection to the divine.
Hakomi gave me a structure where I felt like I could blossom as a person. As a therapist, definitely, but also as a person. Like, I ended up embodying more and more of who I am. I didn't start out life that way. I started out life as the son of Holocaust survivors. They were not in great shape. My bedtime stories were Hitler's invasion of Vienna, literally. They were literally my bedtime stories. And so the world did not seem like a safe or nice place. And still, I'm kind of looking out the window here. It seems pretty good. But when I get human beings into the mix, we're a really messed up species.
Agreed.
Really destructive and beautiful and loving, and also really mean and unconscious. And so I think Hakomi gave me a place where I could embody more of my own lovingness.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it really developed over time. Not only did my skill get better, over time and with practice, but also it kind of gave me more room to be myself. And that's been very meaningful for me. And little bit by little bit. And I go periodically, I think, oh my God, this species is, let's just wipe them all out of the planet. Like, it's just not working. We're making it worse and worse as we go along. But then I get with actual real people, who I know or my clients, then we can do this work that just, it inspires me doing it.
Mm-hmm.
The last training I did a couple of demonstration sessions and watched a couple of student sessions that just were like watching magic, like somebody just like their spirit just lighting up, and it's a very beautiful kind of thing. And I'd be lying if I said every session was like that, but there are enough of them that's satisfying, that's nourishing to do, and that involves being able to embody this kind of, having a lot of technical skill and knowledge, but also embodying loving presence.
Yes. Could we get more specific about the structure, as you mentioned, that helped you blossom as a person? And it sounds like that when you're working with a client, you're open to what emerges. And that blossoming is part of the innate healing capacity, the identifying missing experience, as you said. Can you tell us more about the structure? Like, why is it? I really want for our listeners to understand how this is different from maybe what they've experienced in the past with talk therapy.
Yeah. I found that I can explain that till I'm blue in the face and not get it across.
I was aware of that as I was asking.
I know you're and when you see it in action, it's very convincing. I know in trainings, I'll be going along teaching, for several hours, and then I'll do a demonstration, and then everything will light up.
Yeah.
Hopefully, and I was worried that this is going to be the one demonstration that's not going to light up, but usually it does. And people, it's just, there's a lot of permission in Hakomi to be who you are, and the basic alignment with this idea that one of the purposes of being around on this planet is to embody your own uniqueness. And so just that's in the air. And then if you're in a session and the client really gets this sense of, oh yeah, I can be myself here, that's when it happens. I think it's really the emotional ambience of that. I see that. I teach a lot in China, and people there really, because there's a lot of cultural and political repression there, when they see the opportunity to really be themselves, they just really know how to use it. And it's like just wonderful, watching how deep they'll go and how much they'll allow themselves to be seen. And same thing here in North America, and I've taught all over the world. But, so I think it's that general orientation and the sense of celebration of the moment. That okay, so this is what's here. Let's let that be here. Let's see where it takes us. Let's see what gathers around it. Let's hang out with it. Let's see what gathers around it. But also, studies about the effectiveness of psychotherapy, the second most important factor is the relationship. So the first most important factor is client readiness. And so then the question becomes, what makes a client ready? Mm-hmm. And I think it's the kind of relationship that you can generate with them. That's part of it, and part of it's just life experiences, and so people are often ready when they've suffered enough, and or they get old enough. They want something. Their longing gets greater than the fear, that kind of thing. So that some of it's out of our control, but the part that I think is within our control is offering a relationship where they feel held deeply.
Yeah, I'm struck by how those two things, number one, the client readiness, number two, the relationship, the therapeutic relationship, how much it's on the interface of the client and the therapist, that it's there's an interdependence with both of those. Mm-hmm. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
And it also feels like something you could teach.
You can, to a certain extent. A lot of Hakomi's not that hard to learn. The internal state takes longer often. And some people are just like that. They just come in and they're like wide open, like angels, and for me, I had to learn both of them, really. I wasn't any good at the technique because I'd learned so well how to be in my head. And
so can you talk us through that process? Because I think a lot of folks can relate to being in the head.
Yeah.
So what helped you become more skilled?
I think it's a combination of feeling safer in general because of the kind of ambience around Hakomi. And part of it was becoming more willing to take risks. Like I remember I'm really interested in piano composition. Mm-hmm. So I went to a concert over in Berkeley, and there was a singer, and she was accompanied by this pianist. The pianist played exactly the way I wanted to play. And so there was a break, and I thought, okay, maybe I go up to him and I ask him if he'll teach me. That's exactly how I want to learn. He's a Emmy Award-winning, composer. So I get up, and and he's still in the room, but he's got all the groupies around him. And I think, oh, great, now I'm going to be a groupie, and I'm going to ask him this stupid question. I'm going to totally humiliate myself. No way. And so, there's therapy is a lot about the forces of expansion and forces of contraction. Freud said that too, libido and thanatos. These are slightly different words now, but I think that's what he meant. There are these forces that want to move out into life and forces that kind of pull back and withdraw from life. So it's this contest between, I really want to learn from this guy, and I don't want to make a fool of myself. And so I sat down and I thought, I'm going to go home tonight and I'm going to really regret this. And so it meant facing this fear of humiliating myself. And so I walked up to him, the crowd, started dispersing, and I said, well, would you teach me piano? And he said, I haven't taught anybody in 15 years. And right now I can't do it because my sister's dying and I'm taking care of her. But when she dies, I'll call you. I thought, sure. But in fact, she did die, and he did call me. And but it took that facing my own fear. And so something, partly that's aging, I'm more, like, I don't want to stop myself. I've, like another 6,000 days on the planet. Like, that's not that much. And I don't want to, I would rather kind of take more risks. And I think that's age-related than I would when I was young. As a teenager, you really want to have the right sneakers, and now I don't care so much. And this is one of the things I like about, you were asking about Vermont earlier. Like, I really like about Vermont is nobody cares what you look like. I'm very happy looking like an aging hippie farmer there. And, I don't have to wear a three-piece suit, and people would laugh at me if I did, probably. But I like that kind of lack of image management.
Yes.
Which is much more prevalent here, I think, in California. As much as I love California, and for other reasons, that there's a relief in that. So, yeah, it's an interesting journey. That I became less likely to be stopped by my own fear of expansion.
And that's a way to emerge from this more hypercognitive approach to living your life. And I imagine in that moment when you were in Berkeley with the pianist composer that you wanted to learn how he did what he did.
Yeah.
You had this moment of recognizing the fear and recognizing the image management.
Yeah.
And also the desire to do it anyway.
Right.
And to be authentic, to honor your authenticity.
Yes. Yeah, so the longing gets greater than the fear in a way. There. And it doesn't mean the fear goes away. I mean, courage is different from fearlessness. Courage is being connected with your heart. And it involves facing fear, or you're going ahead even though you're scared. But it was the same kind of thing of calming down that part of me that was afraid of moving into life. And so I over time I developed more and more ability to do that. I really like interacting with strangers, and having these unusual, relationships with them, that, they don't expect. This form of entertainment.
When did you write your first book?
It must have been the end of the 90s.
Okay.
Very early in around 2000. I wrote it really from a class I was teaching at JFK University of how to do couples therapy. So I have a lot of experience in couples therapy. And a very practical, like how-to book. that uses a lot of these principles and techniques. And it gave rise to mindfulness-centered couples therapy, which is kind of really an offshoot of Hakomi. I owe a lot to Hakomi for that. And then I've been writing, I wrote some other portions of books, and then I started writing fiction.
And tell me about that switch, because it sounds like you wrote from your experience as a therapist, and then there was something stirring that made you want to write novels, write fiction.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I had this idea for a novel, and I kept trying to outline it, which is what you do with a, an academic book. And it just, like, was just very distasteful. Like, I didn't want to do it. And then I took a class in the Mill Valley Library. It was not a good class, but the class gave me the idea that I can just start writing. And somewhere along the line, I was reading T.S. Eliot, and I could feel his relationship with words. It was a very strange experience. I don't believe in this kind of stuff, so what I'm going to tell you is, if somebody else told me, I wouldn't believe this kind of stuff. So I hear this voice in my head: you have to read the Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock.
Sure.
And I don't hear voices in my head, but so I thought, okay, I'll go read it. I look it up online. I start reading this thing, and I'm just weeping because I can feel his relationship with words. I didn't understand anything he's talking about. I mean, he's really, whenever I'd read him, I think, what is this guy talking about? What's the meaning? Here I could just feel his relationship with words. And I remember, like, this late at night, and my wife's already in bed, and and I'd like crying and like brought the poem over to her and read parts of it and crying, and then I realized that I have a certain sense of how words fit together, and it's very unique to me. It's it's not better or worse than anybody else, but it's really an expression of me, and I started writing from that place. So the book is called The Weeping Buddha.
Yes.
And so it's the story of Buddha is reincarnated in the 20th century, 21st century, as an impoverished woman in Southeast Asia. And lives a terrible life. And she doesn't want the job. She has all these experiences, that she's in touch with something much bigger. But she really doesn't want to do it, and she's really miserable, and her husband is mistreating her, and she eventually has to leave her child there. And so it's the story of her coming into her own, even though she didn't want the job. And she meets this environmental attorney in New York who's kind of lost his soul, and they meet up on this backwater river up in Mendocino. And it's a story of their relationship, and they're rescuing themselves and each other from living life the way somebody else thought they should live it. So it was very emotional writing the book for me. So that also kind of brought me deeper and deeper into myself. And really the last third of the book, I think I cried every time I sat down to write, which was every day. Like, I would be so touched by the story. Like, I wasn't writing the story. Like I don't know what's coming next. But it was so touching to me. And I think that also kind of really helped in bringing me more to myself.
Blossoming as a person.
Blossoming, that's a good word.
But I'm really touched by the relationship with words that you were talking about. And before that, you said you had heard a voice that told you to read the poem. That sounds like divinity. How do you make sense out of that?
I don't know. Is that my unconscious speaking? Is it some spirit teaching, trying to reach me? And I don't actually have a lot of belief in those kinds of things. Like I don't have a belief in being possessed by spirits, but I've been possessed by a spirit. Like, what was going on there? Like, I have no idea, and it was different from any kind of this reality experience I've had. I don't know what's going on, I got somehow identified with somebody who was dead, and wanted to get a message across to his daughter. So I'm very skeptical, and from the generation that was subject to a lot of misinformation in the psycho-spiritual world, not to mention the world of supplements, like all the claims, that we went through, so I end up being very suspicious, but then some of the stuff happens to me, so I don't know what to make of it, really. I think, sometimes you have unusual experiences, and they're fun. I like them. I could use some more of them.
Mm-hmm. So before we started recording, you were talking about your use of AI.
Yeah.
And I want to know more about how you approach artificial intelligence, how you think it might be helpful for us. As we share this podcast and people learn about Hakomi and maybe haven't heard about Hakomi before, I always think about accessibility. Like, how do we allow more people to experience healing modalities like Hakomi?
Yeah.
And so AI seems to maybe offer a way to create more accessibility. How do you hold it?
Yeah, that is one of the things. Is it can be more accessible and certainly cheaper than psychotherapists, and because it can do it on its own, and it requires some kind of supervision probably, but really does, like it with medicine too, of course. It can give people access to professional services that they wouldn't be able to afford or find locally, and services that may be quite well done. So there's some recent research studies on AI and psychotherapy, and number one, people can't tell a difference between a real therapist and an AI therapist.
Interesting.
And number two, even without knowing, who they're talking to, if they are asked which they like better, they like the AI therapist.
Really?
Yes.
That's surprising.
I'm not surprised. AI is so much nicer to me than regular human beings. It starts every interaction with, "That's a great idea, Rob."
AI is so encouraging.
It's very encouraging, yeah. So, I've been teaching it 3 different things. So I have AI twins. Actually, I have a writing twin also, so it helps me structure some of my writing, which is good for me because it gives me that left brain approach. But for therapy, I'm teaching it how to do therapy the way I do it, and in a Hakomi approach. And I'm also teaching it how to train therapists, although that may be really irrelevant in 10 years. And then I had an idea like a couple of nights ago.
Wait, why would that be irrelevant?
Because we're not going to need therapists, like human therapists, for most things. This gets really good results with depression right now. And others, there's certain like cognitive behavioral and Gottman method and IFS are kind of beginning to use it. And, there are things that it doesn't know how to do yet.
It just hasn't been fed
the
data. It hasn't been fed the data yet.
It hasn't been fed the data. And some of the things like Hakomi is very visual. So, I could do Hakomi by listening to voice quality, but I can also, being able to see you makes a big difference. Mm-hmm. And so, because I can read all the stuff that's happening with your body, and that has an impact on me. And so I get a lot of body information. So that requires AI to be able to read bodies.
Mm-hmm.
And the technology is there to track, yeah. Technology is there. It's too expensive right now to apply, on the level I'd want to apply it. But I understand from my AI researcher friend that it'll be about 10 years. But in the meantime, it can talk to you the way we're talking now, back and forth. You don't have to push buttons. And then I can develop protocols for how it should interact with people. And so I thought, well, what what if people didn't need a psychotherapist? What if they needed a landing place for their internal worlds, which is different from, complex psychotherapy. So I've been working on an AI compassion companion.
Compassion companion.
Yeah. So I'm not finished training it, but I think it's quite good so far. This is like, I'm into it maybe 5 hours of training.
Okay.
It's not a lot, but I've had it I've uploaded, videos of me working with clients and all, manuscripts of my books. And so it has a lot of information, then I correct it. So I said, no, you're still focusing on the content of what people are saying. And,
You're supervising.
I'm supervising it. Yeah. And then I said, redo this, give me a sample session with a client where you apply what I said. Here are the 4 steps of accessing. You're good at step 1, 2, and 4, but you're forgetting step 3. So, here's how you focus on that. And now redo the session and incorporate this. And it learns, instantly. It's very satisfying as a teacher.
It is very satisfying.
Yeah. So now I'm teaching it how to be compassionate. And so I've developed a protocol for how it can interact in compassionate ways with people who are suffering in some way, as everybody does. And so I don't know, what I'm going to do with it yet. And this is really hot off the press. I mean, yesterday it finally developed it enough so I now have a link, that you can play around with. So I'm testing it with friends and seeing where it goes.
Can we play with it?
We can try. We can see, because this is really, really brand new, but it's fun for me.
It is fun. It's very exploratory.
It's very exploratory, and at this point in my life, I don't have a lot of ambition, and I spent a lot of my life trying to make something happen, and usually I could succeed, and so this is the first thing that's juiced me for a while, because it's so fresh.
What was the last thing that juiced you?
Writing fiction.
Yeah.
Really.
The first one? The Weeping Buddha?
Weeping Buddha, yeah. That one really got me.
Yeah.
I have to reread it at some point and see if it's good. But I think it's really well written. It's very poetic and very romantic and very action adventure-ish. Okay, so here you get a screen with a little heart and some olive branches or something. And it says, a gentle poetic companion for emotional healing and presence. So what I need here to input, and we'll see if this works, is some way that you're having a hard time. It doesn't have to be a huge thing, but some little piece.
Sure. I have a longing to work less and to have more time for spiritual practice. And I'm buying a house. And so there's a tension between them. And I feel a little stuck around it.
Great. I think you must be me. Okay, let me see if I can summarize that. Okay, so your concern was, you said, I struggle with saying no.
I struggle with saying no.
And this is how the program responds. So far it's so good. We'll see. It said, yeah, that's tender. The struggle to say no, it carries so much. It's not just about the word, is it? It's the fear of what might happen if you say it, of being misunderstood, of disappointing someone, or of being left behind. You're not alone in that. So many people carry that weight of always saying yes, even when something inside is quietly whispering no. I'm here with you. No pressure to change anything right now. If you check in, where do you feel that struggle in your body? Maybe in your chest, your throat, your belly. Take your time. I'll stay with you. And just so you know, your no matters. Even if it's small, even if it's quiet, I'll still be here.
That's quite good. I feel it in my jaw.
Yeah.
Like I hold my no back here.
Ah, your jaw. Yeah, that place holds back the no, the words that want to come, the truth that tightens. It's great language.
Yeah.
There's so much intelligence in your body, isn't there? Even the tension is trying to protect you, trying to help you feel safe. Can we stay with that sensation together just for a moment? Let it be there without needing to change it. You don't have to do anything. Just notice the holding, the clenching, the effort it takes. And we're here with it. I just want you to know you don't have to hold it all by yourself. You get to have a voice. You get to have boundaries. And you're still worthy of love. I'm staying right here with you. So you could just see what happens if you stay with that feeling. What happens next?
It feels less tense.
Actually, you can talk right into it, I think.
Okay.
So if you just press the microphone button.
This is quite well trained, Rob. It feels less tense in my jaw. It feels like a softening. I feel less alone with it.
Yeah, I feel that with you. Something softening, huh? That's beautiful. The intensity isn't so sharp now, and you're not carrying it alone anymore. I'm right here with you. It's amazing what happens when something inside is met, gently, without pressure. Like your jaw. Your heart knew it didn't have to brace so tightly. Take your time here. You don't need to rush forward. Let the softness be real. Let it stay with you a little longer if it wants to. You're doing something really important, letting yourself be seen, and that matters. You matter. So you can see, if you stay with it, it's missing the next instruction, which is, no, tell me what happens when you stay with that. So if you stay with the softening on your jaw and anywhere else it softens, what happens?
Makes me want to cry.
Oh, I'll put that in. Yeah, of course it does. Something deep is loosening, isn't it? When we stop bracing even a little, the tears can finally come. There's nothing wrong with that. Crying is sacred. It's the body's way of letting go, of saying, I don't have to carry this alone anymore. You're safe here with me. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. Then any response you have to that, I can input.
I'm staying with the feeling, but I'm also marveling at what you've trained it to do. And I'm noticing both.
Yeah.
And it also sounds way better than I ever sounded when I went through my level 1 Hakomi training.
Yeah. It learns so quickly.
It's a really beautiful demonstration of what Hakomi can do.
Yeah, and it'll keep going. Like, if you respond, I don't know if you want to do another round responding to it, but it'll keep.
Yeah. Let's do one more.
Okay. Well, let's go back in. So it's what it's responding to is it's saying something's loosening, isn't it? When we stop bracing, even for a little, the tears can finally come. And then it's crying is sacred, and you don't have to carry this alone anymore. You're safe with me. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. And just notice what comes up next.
I have an image that is coming up of like a knot, tight knot that is starting to come apart.
Yeah, I can see it in your hands. So now, of course, AI can't see that because it doesn't have the image recognition thing, but I can input. I see an image of a knot that's very tight, beginning to loosen up. That image, it's powerful. A tight knot, maybe tangled for a long, long time, finally beginning to loosen. Yeah, that feels just right. Something old is letting go, huh? Not all at once, but it's beginning. Like the part of you that's been holding everything together finally gets a breath. Let's stay with that image. Can you feel what it's like to not pull on the knot, but just be with it gently, lovingly? You don't have to untie it all right now. Just being here with that loosening, that's enough. I see the tenderness in you. And I'm here with all of it.
That's really beautiful. It's it even has the huh. Did you train it to do that?
I did.
I'm going to be with the loose knot.
Say it again.
I'm going to be with the loose knot.
Yeah.
That feels like a good place.
This is Rob rather than AI. The way you're talking is quieter, and there's kind of a reverence with it.
Yes. Yeah.
So you're touched into something reverent there.
I feel that. I feel like like a lot of judgment about the knot and like I get rid of the knot. And yeah, I feel more of a befriending the knot.
You want to see what it says about the judgment of the knot?
Sure.
I have had a lot of judgment about this knot. Yeah, that makes so much sense. When something's been tangled inside for so long, when it's kept you stuck or small, it's easy to judge it, to get frustrated, to wish it were different. But that knot, it didn't form by accident. It came from somewhere. It was trying to protect something precious. Can we be with it now, not to fix it, but to understand it? You don't have to fight it anymore. What if the knot isn't a flaw, but some kind of wisdom, a way you learn to survive, to stay safe, to belong? Even the judgment, that too makes sense. It's another layer of pain. And I'm still here with all of it, with all of you.
That's beautiful. It's I'm also feeling your legacy in that. Like it's bigger than you.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It's
Yeah, because I'm not going to keep doing this forever. You know, I'm my expiration date is, going to appear sooner or later. And I really tried to teach it how to speak and think like me.
Yeah, I feel that. It's profound. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm glad it was meaningful. Actually, it's really nice to see the comparison between what their first and this, and the difference, and when you actually teach it something and how it can learn.
Yeah, thank you. I feel like we emerged victorious and like arm in arm with ChatGPT.
Yes.
The training that you've done with the Compassion Companion. Thank you.
Welcome. Nice to see this part of you.
Thanks. I've been tracking what's happening in medicine with AI, and there's still a way that physicians are learning how to develop a relationship with AI. There's some places where it's so obvious that AI is helpful, like with breast cancer diagnosis, looking at mammograms. AI outperforms physicians pretty much every time.
Really?
And so what you're talking about here with you said the clients prefer the AI therapy. It's just so curious to me. And so what do we need to be mindful of? Like how do we approach this? Because you're right. I mean, this is a way of making it more accessible. And what's the potential cost of that? And how does the dog wag the tail instead of the tail wagging the dog?
Right. Well, and we don't know what the eventual outcome will be of any of this. So we know that a lot of people are going to lose their jobs over the next 20 years. And so the way wealth is distributed may change as a result of that. But more than that, I think AI offers people a relationship with someone who's responsive and can be attuned to them the way human beings often can't be. Because human beings get triggered and they want what they want, and sometimes there are conflicts and what you want and what your partner wants. And so I think people are going to turn more towards AI for intimate relationships, meaning both emotional and sexual intimacy. So already people are turning to non-human forms of sexuality more and more. The pornography industry is healthy and doing well. And then you've got companies like Moi. Do you know about Moi?
No, tell me about that.
At MWAH, as in a kiss. Moi. Hong Kong company. Gives you an AI companion, an AI sexual companion. So it's just with words. I don't know if they're images or not, but so people were, uploading their sexual secrets into this, and there was a leak.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's not a happy ending. I don't know what happened to the company, but this is going to happen more and more. And, like for AI doesn't judge you or have negative reactions or reject you or fight with you, and it's very compliant. So I think that people are going to turn more and more to AI for relationship needs. And I think one possibility is that it's going to affect population growth and reproduction rates.
Decrease reproduction rates.
Yeah.
And what about the blossoming of us as humans?
Well, I think there'll be two groups of people. There'll be the AI folks who will turn to AI because it's easier and more predictable. It's like you can always get some junk food at 7-Eleven, like it's great. It's always accessible. So I think AI is like that. And then there are going to be the health food people, and people who want actual contact with humans and human bodies. I think when you interact with AI, there's a tremendous potential of imagining connection. And, studies on kind of the effect of imagining stuff and actually doing it, it goes a long way. Like studies of basketball, like training people how to shoot hoops, like the ones that
the visualization,
the visualization,
the power of it.
Yeah. Or, people would disagree with us, but religion too, like, a lot of religion may be imagining connection with some higher power who's in contact with you. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but it's hard to prove. But, so AI could possibly do the same thing. So I think it's going to be more and more compelling, particularly when you get visual images, and then you get into robotics after a while. So I don't know. I think that seemed awful in some way, but also to cure the population problem. And the people that will be left will be people who are interested in human connection. So we don't know, but it could also be misused in lots of ways. Lots of ways that it can be misused, and that's the scary part about it. I don't know if there are enough safeguards in the system to prevent it from being used in manipulative ways, which I doubt that there are those. So that's the scary part of it.
That is the scary part. But one thing you're raising that I think is compelling is the loneliness epidemic that we have.
Right.
And, I see it a lot in my medical practice. We know it's linked to autoimmune disease. We know it's linked to depression. We know it's linked to a shorter health span.
A shorter what span?
Health span, a period of time, as opposed to lifespan, a period of time that you're relatively healthy and free of chronic disease. And so that's a potential force for good if it's used correctly.
Yeah.
I also, as you were talking about your compassion companion and the training that you've been doing with it, I hear a thread of creativity with how you're using AI. Can you speak to that? I'm curious about your creative process and how that's developed over your lifetime and career, and what's the role of AI in helping you with creativity?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I haven't settled it. Like, I first started playing around with it in writing fiction. I had an idea for a book, and I realized after a few interactions with it that it could write the whole book for me. I could write the book in an afternoon. But then what's the fun of that, It's not. And so then I explored different ways of working with it. Like, can you help me? I don't want to outline it. You outline it for me. Here's the basic idea. Give me the chapter headings and how many words per chapter. And then when I was exploring, I then said, okay, write me the first chapter. And then I corrected it and I said, that I want there to be more conflict in there, and I want this character to speak in more romantic ways. And so there's some creativity in that, but it's reduced to creativity. And so then I've been using it sometimes to edit. Now it's good at editing, or I'll say, how would you improve this chapter? And it'll give me 15 ideas, and I'll say, okay, I'll do number 1, 5, 14. So I was thinking, what's the difference between asking those questions to AI or asking my wife? One's a machine, one's a human being. AI's ideas are not consistently good, but a lot of them are good. Mm-hmm. So why not use that? Is it cheating? To do that way. For me, like I appreciate help in structuring things, and in the linear part, which frees me to be more creative, and then I see how it thinks, and that becomes a little bit of a model of how I can think about things. Like, okay, it's looking at, did I develop the character enough? Is the action too slow? Is there a problem an unsolvable problem in this chapter that, the main character has to deal with? So how it analyzes things can influence how I analyze things. So I feel like I learn from it also, and that helps. I feel like it frees me up to be creative rather than takes over creativity. It kind of lets me go to another step with it.
It sounds like there's a synergy. There's a way that it broadens and maybe deepens your own creative process.
It broadens it, yeah.
To have a tool.
Yeah. Other people in my writing groups hate it.
Changing direction a little bit. I never knew Ron Kurtz. I'm curious about your relationship with him, what you learned from him. I was fascinated when I first started learning about Hakomi with this systems approach, which you don't often hear in psychotherapy. So can you share with us your experience with Ron Kurtz and anything you want to share about him?
I generally had a very sweet relationship with him, and I stayed in touch with him over the years. I would organize workshops for him sometimes. He'd come down here and do demonstration sessions or talk at CIS and some program I ran. But it was a very sweet personal relationship, and he was very loving. He could be nuts also. He could get triggered. He was not completely well baked, but he was a great teacher, I thought.
What made him a great teacher?
I think his ability to embody loving presence, and his ability to track people and see what was going on moment to moment with them. So that was inspirational. And I loved how he did therapy. He was such a master of it. So we spent a bunch of time together, and towards the end of his life, he was out of touch with a lot of other people in my older generation in Hakomi. But we maintained contact till a couple of weeks before his death. But he was also, I like that he was honest about stuff. I remember one time when I organized a workshop for him, we were in my office, and there were 10 people in it, and he was in the middle of a session, and he turns to the group and he says, I don't have a clue what's going on here. Does anybody know? And I remember another time
He
where
had humility.
he had humility, yes. He did. I mean, he could also be arrogant, but he has humility. He was accessible as a human being a lot of the time. Another time is doing a session, and he said, I think I'm having a fight with my client here. He says, Rob, you're a couples therapist. Why don't you do some couples therapy with us? So I actually did some couples therapy. He said, okay, I know where we're at. And that kind of dovetails into the systems thing. And Hakomi, one of the things we track is the system. In more analytic terms, you'd say the transference, countertransference system between client and therapist. And like, what are the patterns of behavior and cognition and emotion that keep repeating themselves in our relationship? So, for instance, I had a client. She would schedule 2-hour sessions, and she would start talking and not stop, basically. And every once in a while, I would try to say, okay, let's stay with that feeling. And she'd say, okay, and let me tell you something else that happened. And so it was like, and so eventually I said, let's pause here for a second. And I think there's some interesting pattern that's happening between us. Like, you're really good at initiating, and you have a lot of energy, and you can take the reins and you just run with them. And it's kind of like we're driving the same car, and I'm a passenger, and every once in a while I say, let's go over here. But you just keep driving. And then I grab the steering wheel and try to make us go over there, and you take it back. And you're kind of doing this all on your own and not getting much from me. And I wonder if that's related to this feeling of loneliness you have in your life. So I'm connecting it to the presenting problem, the system between us to her presenting problem. And she said, God, I do this with everybody.
Is that jumping out of the system?
That's jumping out of the system. So you're naming the system.
Yeah, and then giving a metaphor.
Yes, one way of doing it. I mean, there are different ways of doing it. One is celebrating it. You're really good at this. Another way is a metaphor. Yeah, you got that one. And there's some other ways of doing it, more observational ways. And
what's the mnemonic, Rob?
MORC.
MORC.
I didn't make it up. MORC. Metaphoric, observational, relational, and celebratory.
Yes.
It's 4 ways of naming. And then you have to connect it with a presenting problem. And there was a woman, Hannah Levinson, who created time-limited dynamic psychotherapy. It's a 12-session analytic model. And she had a very good sense of humor. That's all she would do, is name the system and connect it up to the presenting problem. In Hakomi, then we go from there and say, let's study this. All the roles in the world, the one you selected was this thing about doing it all on your own. Let's find out how that happened, and if there's some leeway there. And so then we begin to explore that. So it's an entrance way into exploring some important patterns in people's lives and how they relate to their presenting problem. You see it reflected in the system between client and therapist.
I'm curious. I know, as a parent, you're not supposed to have a favorite child. I'm curious if you have any favorite clients, or maybe couples as clients, or stories that you could share about your experience.
I do have a client that I really impressed me. She was a Hispanic teenager. I saw her for free. And she came in with her grandma. Grandma didn't speak English, so the teenager was translating, which I wasn't too happy with. So I decided I would do therapy in Spanish, which is, I know babysitter Spanish. And so that really wasn't working. And so they get in a big fight. And so then the girl, turns away from grandma and looks at me and says, see, nobody's on my side. And I thought, yeah, this doesn't seem like she's on your side. I didn't know what she's talking about. She's arguing. And when she said it, I could feel in my bones the truth of what she said. So I started to cry. And not heavily crying, but, tears coming down. And I'm looking at her, and she's looking at me like, who's this person? And we're just in silence. I'm looking at her, she's looking at me, and I can just feel I can feel her world. And then one tear comes down her cheek. And after that, she was like came in religiously. So she would be diagnosed as oppositional defiant disorder. Really uncontrollable kid, like really fierce. She was like really little, really fierce. You would, and she'd come in and she'd say things like, "Oh," I'd say, "Oh, you really look really happy today," and she'd say, "Oh yeah, I've just been running on cars." I said, "What does that mean, running on cars?" She says, "Well, you find a car, like a long row of cars, and you get up on the first one, you run across down the row." I said, "Doesn't that hurt the car?" She said, "Yeah." And so she'd come in, and like the third session, she came in, and she could be very polite. And so she's sitting there kind of very properly with her legs crossed. And she said, and by the way, what do you do for a living? Like she had no idea why she was in there. But she'd come, she kept coming, and then one day she says, she'd come in and she's really, she's bouncing. And she's sitting across the room, and she's like bouncing, her legs are bouncing. And so with Hakomi, you're contacting the present moment a lot. So I said, you're really bouncy today, what's up? Oh, she walks in the room and she says, "I'm so high, I'm not pregnant." She thought she was pregnant.
Oh.
She's a 14-year-old.
She's relieved, yes.
She's relieved. Yeah, that's how I heard it, too. So I said, "What's with the bouncing?" She said, "I told you." I said, "You told me what?" She said, "I'm so high." I said, "Oh, you're high." I said, "What'd you take?" She said, "I don't know. It was these little blue pills with like a little bunny on them. It's like ecstasy mixed with something." So we figured out it was ecstasy mixed with some kind of amphetamine. So I said, "Oh," she was celebrated. And, I'm thinking, God, like other, therapists will often throw people out if they come to the office stoned. She was way stoned. And so I said, "Wow, I don't know what to say. I want to tell you my opinion, but if I tell it to you, you're really not going to like me. And so I think I better not." She said, No, tell me. So I said, "Okay, if it's up to me, I'd have you not go within like a mile of any drugs." She said, "Well, I ran the mile today. It was like just over 6 minutes." So she's on speed, right, and running. So I think, this is dangerous. And I said, I'm worried about you, but I know I can't tell you what to do, so I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm just telling you that I would not have you go anywhere near drugs. And she said, "Really?" I said, "Yeah, really." She said, "Okay then, pinky shake." And so we do a pinky shake, and so she comes in the next session, and she says, "I got rid of the drugs." I said, "Great." She said, "I sold them at a profit." Anyway, we really got along. And, I appreciated her wildness, and
and she appreciated your celebration of her.
Yeah. It was I often think of her. I wonder what. I ran into her grandma years later hiking in the woods, and she said she was going to junior college in Santa Rosa. I thought she would make. Oh, there's another one with her. She would defy her teachers, and so she got sent to, they put you in jail after school. What is it, the study hall?
Detention.
Detention. So she's in detention, and she really didn't like the teacher that ran detention, and so she was claiming that he would watch pornography, while the students are working. He'd watch, as his computer silent, watch pornography. So she did something in it, and he complained about her, whatever she did. He said, "What are you doing, watching pornography on your computer again?" He said, "You're going to the principal's office." She said, "You want me to go to the principal's office? You take me by the hair and you drag me there. Otherwise, I'm not going." So, just tremendous, fierceness and So she got expelled. She got suspended, and then they had an expulsion conference with the superintendent of schools and the teacher and her mother, and so it was coming up. So we prepared for this.
You were part of it.
I was part of it. I was not part of the conference, but I was part of her preparation.
Okay.
So I said, "What do you do if she said, "This guy hates Hispanic students." So I said, okay, here's what you do. If he's said or done things to other Hispanic students that were abusive, then you have people, your friends write statements. He's done this, he did this, he said this, and you put him in a file folder and you come with that to the meeting.
Good advice.
So she goes to the meeting, and the superintendent says, look, we're going to have to expel you from school. She said, well, before you expel me, can you read this file? He says, okay. So he reads the file, he turns to the teacher, and he says, if I ever hear that this happens again, you're going to be fired. And she was reinstated.
Wow.
So what a great experience for her to have. Standing up for herself, not being an obnoxious brat, but standing up for herself in a measured way that got her what she wanted.
That's right. Being successful.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful story.
Yeah. Anyway, I think of her. I have lots of favorite clients, but she stands out in my mind.
Yeah. Her spirit really comes through in the story that she shared. So, Rob, as we are finishing our podcast today, is there anything else you want to share about your work with Hakomi, your creative life, your work with AI? Any final thoughts?
I think we've covered a lot of territory here. I think the essence of what I am interested in is creating environments where people can really blossom. Use your word from earlier.
I think it was your word.
My word.
It was your word originally.
I think that's what's most important. And psychotherapy, I think there's a place for psychotherapy that cures pathology. But John O'Donohue, the priest, he talks about anamkara, a friend of the soul. I'm much more interested in being a friend of the soul and allowing people to blossom than I am in finding out what's wrong with them. Now, other people are interested in other things, and I think there's plenty of place for that. And certainly there are places in people where their brains aren't working, and they're having hallucinations and psychosis. But I think often people they need a landing pad for orphaned feelings, and to have those appreciated. And the act of somebody sharing their deep feelings with you, I think, is sacred.
Yes.
And so that's where I would like at least part of the profession to go. And there's room for lots of different approaches, and different things are going to appeal to different people. And I'm interested in teaching people how to embody loving presence in whatever they do, because it's not just in therapy. You can't kind of just do in therapy and not do it in the rest of your life, And I'm not always a perfect example of loving presence. There's things that can trigger me. A lot of the time I'm pretty calm, but I think for me, that's what's important, most important.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for being with me today. I so appreciate your loving presence and how you've taught a generation of Hakomi therapists. It's really important work. Thank you.
You're welcome. And at one point I figured out I had taught a quarter of the licensed therapists in the Bay Area.
Oh my gosh.
In different contexts.
That's amazing. Thank you.
Thank you for the time together.